Welcome to Serious Coin, the podcast where we have rich conversations about wealth. I'm your host, Kelly Willis Green. I've often wondered what it must be like to be born into extreme wealth. And somebody who knows is my guest today, Danielle Saputo. Danielle is a third-generation member of one of the world's wealthiest families. Now, Saputo may not be a household name, but you probably know their dozens of dairy brands. And their story goes back to 1954, when 2 years after immigrating to Montreal from Sicily, with $500 and a bicycle for deliveries, the family started a cheese-making company. Today, Saputo is one of the largest dairy processors in the world. Their products are sold in over 60 countries on 5 continents, and the family is on the Forbes list of the 500 richest billionaires. But what sets Danielle apart isn't her extreme wealth, but the fact that she's also a legacy coach, which means she's one of a tiny number of very wealthy people who earn a living teaching other wealthy people how to be better at it. This is part one of our conversation, and in this episode, Danielle speaks about what it was like growing up as a Saputo, and then the two-part deep dive she's taken personally. First, to figure out her own identity, and second, to be part of her family, yet independent of it. I started our conversation by recounting the history of the Saputo success story, and I asked Danielle what it felt like to hear it and know that it was her family we were talking about.
It almost feels surreal. When you're within something, you don't quite see its full grandeur as, just here listening to you having recited what you just did. It's like, oh my, is she really talking about my family? And really it's when you live it, and maybe I sort of go back to, my parents really enforced a level of humbleness when they
Mm,
raised. I mean, I'm one of five. We're five girls, so one of five daughters, and that I think two words come to mind right now. There was a level of frugality and a level of humbleness, and I think growing up with those two values, it really makes me feel disconnected from you telling the story as you just said. It's like, yeah, but I guess that is true.
yeah, I mean, as you described that, those two words, that could relate to my upbringing as well. And I assure you, we did not have as many zeros in our bank account, but those are universal values, frugality and humility. But still, I guess your family name was prominent in the Italian community in which you grew up. So within that community, even if at home, those were the values, but within the community, were you treated differently? Like, were you the kid that everyone wanted to have at their birthday party and, that kind of thing?
I never felt like the kid who was invited to everyone's birthday party, but I would say it was in my later years. I remember one of my first jobs. Um, and I was really taken aback by the response. So I was working, and it's funny, I don't even remember the name of the company, but I was actually a computer programming. I was just testing all the bugs in programming, and I remember there was a colleague of mine who I saw her in distress, and she goes, "Oh my God!" She goes, "My husband's not able to go pick up my daughter on time. I have to pick up my daughter, and I don't have a car." So I looked. I said, "Listen," I said, "I have nowhere to be after work. I'd be more than happy to drive you wherever you need to go." And her reaction caught me very much by surprise, right? I'm just looking. I'm just another colleague, another individual trying
Well,
to
what
make.
was her reaction? That,
Well,
wow,
the
you would
fact
do
is,
this?
when we were in the car, she almost like looked at me. It's like I feel like I'm with a movie star, and
Don't you have
we
a driver who does this?
and it was just that reaction of her not like I by nature I'm a giver. So when I saw her in that car feeling so, oh my gosh, you're giving me a lift, and oh my
Mm,
gosh, like I can't take you to see the front of my house, and I
right.
yes, it was really um yeah, a moment of, oh no, I don't want to be seen differently than anybody else because I am a person just like anybody
Yes.
else. I have the same feelings and the same struggles and the same. So having felt like I was being put in a different, view by a colleague who I was respecting as much as anybody else there,
Mhm.
and realizing that there was this kind of feeling of, oh, she's in a different class, I can't cross that line, was an eye opener, and left me a little like, oh shucks, I guess there's more people out there who might see me with those eyes than I ever really opened my eyes to.
Yeah, and that can be that creates that sort of division, I guess, among people. I've certainly heard that from other very wealthy people. Sometimes people go off to university where, it's a different city and they're anonymous, but bring a friend home for Thanksgiving dinner and they see the kind of wealth that the individual actually comes from. And it can disrupt friendships, relationships sometimes. Did you run into that kind of thing beyond that example that you're giving?
Absolutely, and what's coming to mind right now. So there again, I did not have a chauffeur taking me to and from school. I did not have a car that took me myself to and from school. I was an individual throughout my high school, and university years. I took public transportation, and if anyone knows Montreal, I lived on the island of Laval, and to get from where I lived to downtown Montreal was an hour and a half on public transport. Um, so, that was the way I went about. And then I remember one time being on a city bus on my way to Cégep, and there were a group of people. And when they were, just introducing everybody and giving their names, I had already had, eh, what do you call it? I've already had reactions when I would say I'm Danielle Saputo, that
Mhm,
I ended up stopping to use my last name. So when people
mhm.
start to ask me, "And so who are you?" I'd say Danielle, and they go, "Danielle who?" And I just say, "Danielle." And I would literally stop there because and it wasn't anything to do with not having pride for who I am and the family I come from, but it really came from the feared ignorance I felt people around me would have by quickly assuming things, or creating an image of me just by knowing my name was Saputo.
Before they have a chance to get to know you.
Exactly.
And how did you reconcile that? Because I know you're married today, and yet you still go by Saputo. So at some point, I guess you've gotten comfortable with that?
It took, and it's funny because I recently sort of created my own, wrote out my own story, and through that through that that is probably when I actually took the moment to contemplate all the false beliefs I've had of myself, or all the stories I've told of myself that have led me to where I am today. It was only then when I took a deep dive and I sort of say, peeled my own pungent onion to get to my core,
Mm,
that I finally say, no, this is who I am. And, people will react as people react, but I can only make choices for myself. And how do I choose to
mhm.
go forward? So it took, I'd say, and not everybody takes the moment to take that deep dive within themselves. But having that I have taken that process, I am now very comfortable. And it's like, yep,
Yeah.
people will react the way people will react, but I am who I am. I know I stand strong with my values and the individual. Believe that I'm a good individual, ready to give and be part of society in the best way that I can. So yes.
Mhm. It's so healthy because I think so often, as you talked about, people try to hide it or they feel guilty. Sometimes they downplay it. They know that there's resentment on behalf of others sometimes, or jealousy. It's a very difficult thing to navigate. And good for you for working that out. Any advice for other people how they go through that process that you went through?
And you know what? It starts with just the simple. I mean, nothing's ever really simple when you're caught in the chaos of things. But for me, it's understanding that you have the choice of the mindset you want to carry. And I see it as, you can have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. In a fixed mindset, you believe everything's already stated and it is the way it is, and you don't think you can change. Whereas a growth mindset is always looking for a learner's path. There can always be something different if you keep working at it. And if you can just come to terms that you have the choice to hold which mindset you want. If you're a fixed mindset individual, it will take work and dedication, and you got to really set yourself up for success to take on a growth mindset, but it is possible.
The Saputos are a large family. Danielle is one of 6 daughters, and her father came from a family of 8. As a child, she remembers everyone gathering each weekend at her grandparents' house, the family hub. I wondered how family dynamics impacted the business and vice versa.
As a child, I think business and family were one and the other. So, can I say there were boundaries? No, I don't think there were. I think the business was the family, and the family was the business in those years. So there really wasn't any line of what separated one from the other. I remember as when I first worked at Saputo. I mean, it was my first summer jobs when I was 15 years old, and I can easily count in one on that there were over 78 family members that were working there. Right? It was just very family oriented.
Yeah. Was there pressure to go into the family business?
I wouldn't say pressure, but like when I think of it, um, you become that young or older teenager, young adult, I would say, and you're saying, my parents instilled that responsibility. Money didn't come freely from my mom and dad. Down to the 5 sisters, we had to work at it, and it was one of those. Okay, I'm of age now. If I can get a lift to the, and it just became the door was open there for us
Mm.
to have that first job. I worked in the filing room and got a paycheck, which was wonderful. Um, Pressure, from my eyes, no, I never felt that there was any pressure one way or the other.
Just opportunity.
Yes.
Well, today, Saputo is a public company. I think it went public in 1997. So that must have certainly changed the dynamic within the family and its relationship to the business. As you say before, there were no boundaries, but I suspect today there very much are boundaries being a public company, although I know that family members are still very significant shareholders and it is managed by your cousin, I guess. How has that changed the dynamic of the relationship between the business and the family?
Well, for me, it's a bittersweet because yes, as a child, I remember, and all this happened just as I married and left Quebec and moved to
Mm.
Ontario. So all that transition happened in line with my own life transition. So I can't speak much of I mean, if I had to say one thing, I can say when I was working in the company in the late 1990s, and when it announced that it was going public, I got married and left. So while I was there, there were still many of my sisters, cousins, family members that were within the business. Within a few years later, there was really one branch of the family was seen in the business. All the other branches, for whatever reason, had left their position in the company.
Hmm.
So it did have definitely its own transition, its own. But if I can say one thing that was really, in 2009. So there again, we are very female dominated in the sense of number of females versus males. I'm one of 21 first cousins. 17 of us are females. Four.
Oh.
But I can say on the female side in 2009, one put out an idea, and since then, I'd say we've been united, gone traveling together. We're on a WhatsApp group. We are connected in a way that really keeps our family value. That even though it's no longer the business itself that brings us together, there is still a great tie. And I think all my aunts and uncles, including my parents, have really enforced the value of family, the value of being there for each other in good times as well as in hard times. And you had asked the question of what I was easy to reminisce how we were always together as children, and even though there's been the change into the 2000s for the business, yes, I don't find that we are. I mean, we don't gather the same way when my grandparents were around.
Hmm.
But like I said, there's a great tie between us female cousins, and we know we can be there for each other in time of need.
Is it informal gathering, or do you have a proper family governance structure, if I can use that word, structured family meetings, that kind of thing?
As far as a greater family unit, which includes all the aunts and uncles, cousins, no, I would say there is no formal governance. It really is, we with nothing written, we know we are there for each other. Now,
Mhm.
if you ask me for my branch of the family, which includes my parents, my five sisters, the husbands, because we are all girls, so it's only husbands in there, and our children, we are in that process of saying, hey, do we put a governance in place? We have started our own meeting since 2013, 2014. So we are in that process of setting some structure in the way we come together and pass on values to our fourth generation.
I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about something I've been thinking a lot about these days is maintaining perspective. And based on the notion that I do think that wealth distances us. It distances us physically, socially, economically, and in distancing we lose connection. We lose perspective with the broader world, potentially, maybe empathy, compassion. There can be a lot of negative consequences personally and socially. And so I just wonder, how you think about that and how you keep it real. Because, I'll just say, you know, I don't know you very well, but I've certainly known you for a couple of years. And to me, in all situations, you've always been so approachable and warm and flexible, and that rarest of all things, just a really nice person. And perhaps not the picture of, what some people would think of as someone who comes from one of the world's wealthiest families. So what do you do to keep it real? Is that an intentional practice for you?
Yeah, and I must say, I think I mentioned earlier that I was, going through the process of writing my own story, and I have always used this metaphor as I came to realize that I, for the longest time, lived in the shadows of my family's grandeur, right? I often
Mm,
played myself small, and it wasn't until I went through this journey myself, and I think that becoming a coach was the doors opening to this journey to my true self.
mm,
Um, and to that question, that wealth sometimes is a distancer, but I also can see wealth as something that really is a blessing that brings people together. And if I were to say one thing about that, it is really to sit comfortable with the person you are. It really starts with knowing who you are as an individual, understanding what makes you tick as a person. And when you can really sit comfortable with that, I think that is really what has allowed me to let my light shine. And, I thank you very much for the description you just gave of me, but it,
mhm,
it, it, it took work for me to get there. And reaching this point that I can share that light with others, I feel
mm.
so blessed by it.
So you did that work. What did that consist of, or what was that work like for you?
It is a process, and I'd almost say, like in most learnings, it's not the destination you reach, but it's in the journey itself. And taking the time to really dive deeper to ask yourself some truly meaningful questions to who your true self really is not an easy going. um, you're really diving deep on how you react to things, on how you look at things. Um, so I don't have one clear process to give you of what my process was, other than I did take a great journey to discover who I feel I am at my most comfortable self, and to be able to bring that forward every day has been enlightening. Has been, I almost say maybe that's my magic ingredient that has allowed me to do what I do, because I really have taken that deep dive to know who I am and know that I'll come forward as authentic as I can.
And I think that's so important and so difficult. Sometimes the wealth gets in the way, because who are you without the wealth, the family name? It's not just maybe the stories you've told yourself, but it's how the world reacts to you would impact how you think about yourself. And so to decouple those two, I would think would be a challenge.
Yeah. And it's that, so as I was saying that, I was writing my story and I titled it I Am Enough.
Mm.
Because I think that
I
is
think that's
both.
many women's story.
Well, yeah, and or even individuals who are in the shadows of their wealthy entrepreneurial parent or grandparent, right? It's
Mhm.
they've done that. Can I even match it? Right?
Or
And
spouse, yeah.
our spouse,
Mhm.
or and exactly. So living in those shadows, and I think I gave that metaphor before, that for many years I lived comfortably in the shadows, not realizing I was that I was behind shadows all my life. And for me to step out of that, step away from that family tree to make the sun truly shine on me, that was a journey. That wasn't just a walk out in the park. That took work for me to step away and say, I love you, tree. I love everyone who's in that tree. But wait a second, there's also me. And in the work I do with families, we talk about paradigms, and this is one of the big ones of, are you autonomous? Or like, sorry, when you move forward in life and make your decisions, do you make them under the thought of being autonomous, or do you make them under the thought of being part of the family?
Mhm.
And the struggle that many people go through, it's like, yeah, but what about me? And then there's the pull saying, no, I got to do what's best for the family. It's we. And this tug of war. And how I go about it, it's not either or. It's not one or the other. It's not me or the family. The best is when you come to that balance of it's both and coming to the realization that if you don't look after your own well-being, if you don't fulfill yourself in every way possible, then you're no asset to the family. But when you've really given all to your own well-being, all to yourself, and really built on your own human capital, that is when you're the greatest asset to the family, and the family for the we grows even that much richer.
You went through a process to do that.
I
But
did.
I also have a sense, and I could be wrong about this, so you'll correct me if I am, but I have a sense that there were some roots there planted by your parents who seem to have a strong emphasis on family values and being a very genuine person. But also, I think your grandfather, I remember you telling me that he announced to your family at one point that we have enough money for several
For 7
generations,
generations, yes.
which is extraordinary. And particularly for someone perhaps of that generation, I don't think there were legacy coaches maybe around at that time. Or I don't know, maybe there were, but clearly he had an idea of wealth as being something that's much bigger than our balance sheet. And what are we going to do with this opportunity? Is that fair?
I guess I would say that that's very fair. And as you bring up my grandfather, I mean, I only have visions of him of being a giving soul. Um, I remember being told stories, and I don't know how many of these listeners know Montreal very well, but when Carey was still a cobblestone road years back, and they were caught in traffic, you would have my father or grandfather who would just open the trunk, and of course there was always produce and stuff there. And while everyone was caught in the heat of the summer traffic, not able to go anywhere, they'd open their trunk and share all that they had with everybody. And I just grew up with that level of giving, with that always thinking of someone else before yourself. Um, if you have something, share it with others. So as my grandfather, left Italy in the time of war, arrived in Canada, and was trying to make means to raise enough money to bring the rest of the family over by boat. I mean, he's seen the two ends of the spectrum, that as he started to gain and build something, he was always of the giving nature. And I do believe that that definitely plays a role in the person that I am today, not only having seen and heard the stories of my grandfather, but then even watching my own parents, really distilling in us of, we are no different than the next person beside us. When we went to school or were part of something, my mother was always there. I'm thinking of when we were in plays, and I think she was sewing the costumes with the next parent. And right. So it really is not, if you differentiate yourself from others and pull yourself thinking you're different than the rest, then yes, wealth will distance you and cause this disconnect. But if you grow up or raise your own family with that giving nature, with that giving ability, with that thing of, you know you mentioned, my grandfather did say, what we've built here is good for 7 generations. Let's, make the next generation feel and do, just the same. I do believe I'd like to think I'm carrying that torch forward, in thanks to him.
And so, in saying that, was there an expectation that, okay, now we want to expand on what we have, or now we want to make sure we don't screw it up? What was the feeling behind that declaration?
That's a question that's never really been thought of. And I think that is the beauty of when you build a strong culture in a family. When the culture is strongly built, you almost don't need to emphasize it or ask the question. It just is.
Mhm.
And I felt to a certain extent that that is the way it was, for me, growing up. It's the values that I saw, I cherished, and to me, I'm just trying to bring them forward. Now, I myself have 3 daughters, and I'm trying to bring those values forward to them, to be not to look, I use the words, not to be, sorry, to change the me to we, to always think of the greater of the group rather than the individual.
Now, your husband is a doctor. What's it been like for him to come into your family and be a member of this very storied Saputo family? You're laughing. There must be a
I'm
story there.
laughing. Yeah, I'm saying there are lots there, and it's questions like that. I always say, I wish he can answer that for himself. I don't want to be the one answering that for him. But it comes back to using the name.
Was he intimidated at first?
Uh, can I say intimidated? Let's just say there were situations that we were caught on our honeymoon, that on our way to our honeymoon, we realized our passports weren't valid because they weren't past 6 months from where the destination needed them to be, past 6 months from our
Yeah.
return date. And we had to go through the whole thing of rushing to get new passports for us to continue, onto our destination. And then I remember, as we're filling out the forms, he just looks at me and he goes, "Are you okay? Would you take my name instead of keeping yours?" And it was like, of course you're newly married and you think, of course I'll take my
Right.
husband's name. And but it was, those were I guess, the actions that made me see, he had a tough time at times without me even knowing it, where he would get colleagues who realized he was married to a Saputo and say, "So what are you still doing here working?
Right.
You're married to a Saputo. You don't have to work." Um, or, he lived in a small town in Windsor when we first married, and it was like Saputo, sorry, it was a very highly Italian populated city.
Oh,
And
so you'd be really well known.
so the name Saputo was like, oh, so yes, I think there was, I don't know what word to use there, if it was intimidation or what it was, but there was definitely a level of, I mean, he, like myself, humble, quiet. We are not showy, I'm all out there individuals. So I think he himself was saying, how can, I love you, I love your family, but how can we keep this level of prestige down?
Yeah. Is it hard for you to spend money?
Um, I'm an individual who always thinks twice. And I always ask myself, is this a desire or is it a real need? Um, so do I spend it like, I'm laughing because I was part of this group, and here I was. It was a group where we talked about finances and stuff. And I remember bringing forward my balance sheet, and I felt like, oh my god. And when I put all my numbers down, I was really taken that I had such a large expense, and I thought, oh my god, I got to watch this, because over the years this can be terrible. And then when I brought it to the table, and I had everyone at the table say, "Oh my God, Danielle, how frugal you are." And I'm thinking, whoa, here I am thinking I'm overspending. And yet everyone at the table who, you know, similar means or less means than myself, are thinking,
Yeah,
"Oh my God, why don't you spend more?"
I get it.
So Yes, in my head, I think I gotta always watch what I spend. I don't spend freely, but yet, when I like something, I do spoil myself every once in a while.
Do you have a guilty luxury, a guilty pleasure in the form of something you
Yes,
enjoy?
I enjoy riding a motorcycle. So, yeah, so I'd spend the extra to get a nice Harley or a nice bike to enjoy those sunsets.
That's something I did not picture. I'm glad I asked the question. So, last segment, I want to ask just at each podcast, I like to ask some sort of free flowing questions around wealth. And we've talked around this issue, but I don't think I've asked you what's the purpose of your wealth?
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, I have three values I go for. I mean, I love to experience life. So if I love to use my wealth to just keep gaining experiences in life. I'm a life learner, so in any way that I have something more to learn, and very often the first gives me lots to learn. Just by experiencing life, I learn lots, but
Yes.
I also engage in lots of courses and continue my education. And third is giving. Not only giving what I can to my own girls in lessons and everything else, but then giving in wherever I feel passionate about to help the next individual do better.
And if you were to finish the sentence, to me, having money is.
That it brings a level of comfort. Um, like I said, multiple words crossed my mind. There was comfort. There was less worry. I've seen individuals, and I think COVID has been a big example. There are those who have grown and expanded their wealth, but there have been those who have lost jobs and had nothing. And when I say, having wealth is really that level of no worries. You're not worrying about putting food on the table, and that really brings a level of comfort that I hope to always experience in my lifetime.
What is one challenge with wealth that most people don't understand until maybe they become wealthy?
The thing crossing my mind with you saying that is that I feel most people think you have wealth, you have it easy. And having wealth is far from being easy, as the whole conversation today has been. It is hard work. It is, um, there's the whole concept of how are you viewed when you're seen to be someone with wealth.
Mhm.
Those are hard things and challenging of knowing who are you really when so many people view you a certain way. So it's a true test to your own character. Um, People think everything comes easy, but wealth can easily be lost and spent. And for wealth to grow and keep being part of your everyday, you need to be attentive to it. And I think that would be the two things that come to mind with that question. Not people think, oh, you have wealth, everything is easy, and it just is not.
Mhm. Who serves as an inspiration or a role model in dealing with wealth that you admire or maybe strive to emulate?
I always have difficulty with those kind of questions.
Mhm.
You're saying that, and my parents and my grandfather come to mind. That I never grew up feeling that the purpose of them starting the company was to be wealthy. Like my dad himself, having gone through his estate planning, at the years back would have thought, oh my gosh, I never dreamed of reaching this. And yet today
Mhm.
he's how many times more than he was that decades ago. Right. So it was
Mhm.
never the dream was never to be rich, to be of affluence. And so when I think of them and I think of wealth, to me, it's being the best person you can be today.
Mhm.
And that's the mentor, those are the people that I tend to strive towards and say, I wish I can be just like them and be the best person I can be today.
Thanks for listening to Serious Coin. I'm Kelly Willis Green. I want to thank my guest, Danielle Saputo. For more information about Danielle's work as a legacy coach, visit her website at daniellesaputo.com. She also has a book coming out in the spring of 2022 entitled I Am Enough. This show was produced by Lead Podcasting. Special thanks to Amanda Capito and Michael Allen for their production, and Bob Ramsey of Ramsey Writes for consulting on this episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to Serious Coin wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Serious Coin podcast is provided for your general interest only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Always talk to a licensed professional before you take any financial decisions.